We continue Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough, with the comparison of Demosthenes and Cicero. These are the most memorable circumstances recorded in history of Demosthenes and Cicero, which have come to our knowledge, but omitting an exact comparison of their respective faculties in speaking, yet this much seems fit to be said, that Demosthenes, to make himself a master in rhetoric, applied all the faculties he had, natural or acquired, wholly that way that he had far surpassed in force and strength of eloquence all his contemporaries in political and judicial speaking, and in grandeur and majesty all the panegyrical orators, and in accuracy and science all the logicians and rhetoricians of his day, that Cicero was highly educated, and by his diligent study became a most accomplished general scholar in all these branches, having left behind him numerous philosophical treatises of his own on academic principles, as indeed even in his written speeches, both political and judicial, we see him continually trying to show his learning by the way, and one may discover the different temper of each of them in their speeches, for Demosthenes' oratory was without all embellishment and jesting, wholly composed of real effect and seriousness, not smelling of the lamp, as Plutarch scoffingly said, but of the temperance, thoughtfulness, and austerity and grave earnestness of his temper, whereas Cicero's love of mockery often ran him into scurrility, and in his love of laughing away serious arguments in judicial cases by jests and factitious remarks, with a view to the advantage of his clients, he paid too little regard to what was decent, saying, for example, in his defense of Callias, that he had done no absurd thing in such plenty and affluence to indulge himself in pleasures, it being a kind of madness not to enjoy the things we possess, especially since the most eminent philosophers have asserted pleasures to be the chiefest good. So also we are told when Cicero, being consul, undertook the defense of Murena against Cato's prosecution, by way of bantering Cato, he made a long series of jokes upon the absurd paradoxes, as they are called, of the Stoic set, so that a loud laughter, passing from the crowd to the judges, Cato, with a quiet smile, said to those that sat next him, "Friends, what an amusing consul we have." And indeed Cicero was by natural temper very much disposed to mirth and pleasantry, and always appeared with a smiling and serene countenance, but Demosthenes had constant care and thoughtfulness in his look, and a serious anxiety, which he seldom if ever laid aside, and therefore was accounted by his enemies, as he himself confessed, morose and ill-mannered. Also it is very evident out of their several writings that Demosthenes never touched upon his own praises, but decently and without offense, when there was need of it, and for some weightier end, but upon other occasions modestly and sparingly. Focus on teaching and doing, but the example, try to bring up the example of other people rather than of yourself, because say, oh, this is the great thing I did, and this is the good, or the thing I didn't do, and But Cicero's immeasurable boasting of himself in his orations argues him guilty of an uncontrollable appetite for distinction, his cry being evermore that arms should give place to the gown, and the soldier's laurel to the tongue, and at last we find him extolling not only his deeds and actions, but his orations also, as well those that were only spoken, as those that were published, as if he were engaged in a boyish trial of skill, who should speak best with the rhetoricians, Isocrates and Anaximenes, not as one who could claim the task to guide and instruct the Roman nation, the soldier full armed, terrific to the foe. It is necessary, indeed, for a political leader to be an able speaker, but it is an ignoble thing for any man to admire and relish the glory of his own eloquence, and in this matter Demosthenes had a more than ordinary gravity and magnificence of mind, accounting his talent in speaking nothing more than a mere accomplishment and matter of practice, the success of which must depend greatly on the good will and candor of his hearers, and as regarding those who pride themselves on such accounts to be men of a low and petty disposition, because pride can interfere with what people accomplish, right? The power of persuading and governing the people did, indeed, equally belong to both, so that those who had armies and camps stood in need of their assistance, as Chares, Diopithes, and Leosthenes of Demosthenes, Pompeu and young Caesar of Cicero's, and as the latter himself admits in his memoirs addressed to Agrippa and Maecenas, but what are thought commonly said most to demonstrate and try the tempers of men, namely authority in place, by moving every passion and discovering every frailty. These are things which Demosthenes never received, nor was he ever in a position to give such proof of himself, having never obtained any eminent office, nor led any of these armies into the field against Philip, which he raised by his eloquence. Cicero, on the other hand, was sent quaestor into Sicila and proconsul into Cilicia and Cappadocia at a time when avarice was at the height, and the commanders and governors who were employed abroad, as though they thought it a mean thing to steal, set themselves to seize by open force, so that it seemed no heinous matter to take bribes. But he that did it most ardently was in good esteem, and yet he at this time gave the most abundant proofs alike of his contempt of riches and of his humanity and good nature. And at Rome, when he was created consul in name, but indeed received sovereign and dictatorial authority against Catiline and his conspirators, he attested the truth of Plato's prediction that then the miseries of states would be at an end when, by a happy fortune, supreme power, wisdom, and justice should be united in one. It is said to the reproach of Demosthenes that his eloquence was mercenary, that he privately made orations for Phormion and Apollodorus through adversaries in the same cause, that he was charged with moneys received from the king of Persia and condemned for bribes from Harpalus. Yeah, don't pull the Glenn Beck thing and practice crying to manipulate people. And should we grant that all those, and they are not few, who have made these statements against him have spoken what is untrue, yet that Demosthenes was not the character to look without desire on the presents offered him out of respect and gratitude by royal persons, and that one who lent money on maritime usury was likely to be thus indifferent, is what we cannot assert, but that Cicero refused from the Sicilians when he was quaestor, from the king of Cappadocia when he is proconsul, and from his friends at Rome when he was in exile, many presents, though urged to receive them, has been said already. Moreover, Demosthenes' banishment was infamous upon conviction for bribery. Cicero is very honorable for ridding his country of a set of villains. Therefore, when Demosthenes fled his country, no man regarded it. For Cicero's sake, the Senate changed their habit and put on mourning, and would not be persuaded to make any act before Cicero's return was decreed. Cicero, however, passed his exile idly in Macedonia. But the very exile of Demosthenes made up a great part of the services he did for his country, for he went through the cities of Greece, and wherever, as we have said, joined in the conflict on behalf of the Grecians, driving out the Macedonian ambassadors, and approving himself a much better citizen than Themistocles and Alcibiades did in the like fortune. And after his return, he again devoted himself to the same public service, and continued firm in his opposition to Antipater and the Macedonians. Now, a lot of people talk about National Socialism, but often what people are talking about as socialism isn't actually what's good for the nation. People don't work that should work, or funnel, when there's all sorts of corporate welfare and stuff that we could be taking care of. It's about giving what's left of, don't repair the roads, give money to foreigners. It's like, do you actually have your, I'm not talking about the NSDAP as something to favor. I'm saying, if you're going to be nationalist, you actually have to put your country first. But you can be you can put your country first without being a nationalist too, because obviously, the inner circles of you at home and that sort of stuff. And why should you spend even more money and less of the money be used to put it overseas if there's stuff to be taken care of in your own country as far as helping the poor or whatever good cause you have. Whereas Lalius reproached Cicero in the Senate for sitting silent when Caesar, a beardless youth, asked leave to come forward, contrary to the law, as a candidate for the consulship. And Brutus, in his epistles, charges him with nursing and rearing a greater and more heavy tyranny than that they had removed. And that sort of stuff also happens, is that people say, remember what happened with if you know what happened with the Maccabees, the Maccabees became just as tyrannical as the people they removed. And we find that nowadays, with, if the Jews have like a couple people who are very powerful, do they care about the other Jews? No. So it's not like it's a Jewish rule the world conspiracy. It's, and not all these families are ruling families, you call them, are Jewish in either ethnic or religious sense, because there's certainly ones that are neither. Finally, Cicero's death excites our pity for an old man to be miserably carried up and down by his servants, flying and hiding himself from that death which was, in the course of nature, so near at hand, and yet at last to be murdered. Demosthenes, though he seemed at first a little to supplicate, yet by his preparing and keeping the poison by him, demands our admiration. Well, if he was going to use it against his enemies or something, but how was admirable to be, this guy was ready to kill, make sure that he was going to kill himself. It's like, yeah. And still more admirable was his using it. Yeah, no, not really. When the temple of the entity no longer afforded him a sanctuary, he took refuge, as it were, at a mightier altar, freeing himself from arms and soldiers, and laughing to scorn the cruelty of Antipater. And to some degree, there should be the sanctity of the house of worship, but that doesn't mean that that they don't stay outside the gates of the temple or the church or whatever to arrest when the person stays in, and even though I had the key to a house of worship, some police waited outside because they were like, we don't, because they're used like on a, Wednesday evening or a Sunday or something. It's like some places are open other times too. And some guy comes in early to the key, so the police kind of stop me. Or they want to make sure there's something going on in the neighborhood. But yeah, you respect the places of worship. Some countries even shut down places of worship. Like, oh, this is a more modest group of people, and so yeah.